I saw another YouTuber the other day talk about his particular brand of tile saw. Somebody had asked a question what the best tile saw out there was, and he had mentioned that he has a DeWalt 24,000. The DeWalt 24,000, in my opinion, is an okay saw. I have never owned one before. I've watched a couple of videos, I've seen pictures of them. There's certain little anomalies that I look for, little things that I think probably other people who buy a tile saw would not look for. Perhaps even other contractors may not look for, that I look for. So I think I've already mentioned it before in other videos. In fact, I have a video that I posted some years ago. I will post the link at the description box down below, where I did a review of a particular tile saw that I bought at Home Depot for about $300. It was my backup when my tile saw kind of took a crap. I had to get it fixed, and I needed a saw for the job that I was doing. So I posted a video on that. It was a critique of that saw, despite what the price was. I know it was only $300, but I was looking for something a little more quality, and that saw wasn't doing it for me. But I did mention on that video that it was great for a homeowner. What I need is something a little better. So I started out with a Tilematic. Tilematic started making saws years and years and years ago. They were powder blue. The whole saw, the tray, the water tray, the saw itself was a powder blue, and it said Tilematic across the side of it. Those saws are what I got into probably 17, 18 years ago now. Accidentally stumbled upon one at a pawn shop, and I got hooked on them. And I owned, I think, 2 or 3 different Tilematics. I still have one as a backup in my storage shed. It doesn't come out unless I have an issue with my main one. So anyway, through the years, or through the last few years anyway, Husqvarna bought Tilematic. So what they did is, it's not blue anymore. Obviously, it's Husqvarna orange, which always is. Husqvarna stuff is always orange stuff. So they kept all the features that were great about the Tilematic, and I love that about Husqvarna, that they didn't change anything. They kept the design and the way that it's set up all the same. They did, however, make a couple of improvements that I really appreciated. First of all, the Tilematic that I had, the pan, as I said, was powder blue, and once that blue started chipping off, then the pan rusted, and I couldn't stand that about those saws. In fact, I think I painted my pan a couple of times just to stop the rust. And so now we have stainless steel, well, galvanized pan, as it were, and it does not rust. So yay, good for Husqvarna. Another thing is also the stands for the Tilematic used to be pointed down. So the legs went straight down and just tapered off to nothing. It didn't have this little rail over here. And so what they decided to do is put a couple holes in that rail. So they're already pre-drilled holes. And of course, the first thing I did when I bought this one is I got a couple of casters from Home Depot, 4 casters from Home Depot, because that prevents me, if I would need to move the saw. It used to be I have to dump all the water and then disassemble the saw, and it was a real pain in the ass. Even if I was just moving it 5 feet or 50 feet, I would have to go through that process of dismantling the whole saw and dumping the water and all that stuff. And now I don't have to do that, because Husqvarna, they did the smart thing. They just put holes there. They didn't put the casters on for you, but you know, it cost $10 to put 4 casters on, so that was a wonderful improvement they did. They kept the same Baldor motor. It's a 1.5 horse power, and it's continuous, and that matters. So the motor will never get hot. You can run it all day long, 24 hours a day, and the motor is very industrial type motor. So I really like that about it. A couple of things that I wish they had done better. These flaps, these little water flaps, are on here by virtue of a screw. So if you can see on there, on the back of the water guard here, you have a screw. This is actually going this way, and they always rip off, and I can't stand that, and I don't know. And then of course they're just one dimensional also. They don't have the sides, and so the sides would be great to keep the water spray at a minimum. and these always fall off. I mean, this one fell off of this one with no effort whatsoever. So I'll probably put it back. This one, which is my main tile saw, the flap has never came off. If I move it too much, it probably will, but it doesn't work that well. As I said, you know, there's still overspray. So I just happened to stumble upon this Land Rover mud flap from a Land Rover that was on the ground out on a road one day, and I decided to go ahead and screw that into the back of my saw. So now I have a large flap there instead of this little puny one that doesn't do any good. Anyway, as I said, they've kept the design just the way that Tilematic had it, and I love that about this saw. The DeWalt, there are some issues about the DeWalt I don't like. They claim that they're plastic tray, and yes, they have a plastic tray, and almost every saw you see is going to have a plastic tray. I don't like the idea of a plastic tray, because all that means to me is once the plastic cracks, you got to buy a new tray. Yes, it does make it lighter. Yes, it's more convenient. Yes to all those things. But I would rather have something I never have to pay for twice. And this I'll never have to pay for twice. So I don't like the idea they have a plastic tray. A couple other things I don't like about it, that the table is actually on the rails, stuck to the rails. And almost every saw you see out there, what you're going to see is some type of mechanism to where the rollers are attached to the rail. And when the rollers are attached to the rail, you can't pull the table out, right? So these, which I love about these, is you can just completely get rid of the table, and I can do my back cuts. That's important to me, because sometimes I'll have a square cut right in the center of a tile, or I'll have, you know, something like a half a square or 3/4 of a square that I got to cut out of a tile, and I can't get this line done unless I do a back cut. So typically I turn it over. Once I make my mark there, I duplicate the mark on the back, I cut, you know, my straight lines normally, and then I have this little back cut that I have to do. So I can take the table off and I can actually feed the tile to the blade up underneath. That's a back cut, and I can get the type of cuts that otherwise would be impossible if my tray was attached to the rail. And that's a huge reason right there why I don't like most saws that are out there, and why I love this one, because then I can just put the table back that quick. So it makes it very, very easy. So obviously we have a fence. This is a removable fence. If you're going to do, say, a 2 or 4 inch cut or whatever size cut, you attach it to the back of the table and you screw it down and you've got a rail. This one has the ability to do a 45. So again, you have 2 of these that tighten down. You have this trough in the center. You put the tile that you want to 45 right there, and then you just run it through and you have a 45 cut. You can do it forward or backward. If you need to do a 45 cut like that, then you could do either which way. So I like that ability about these saws. That's one of the, I guess, the downside about having this saw is that you have one of these pieces, whereas with the DeWalt you don't have to worry about that, because the blade actually will tilt in the same fashion that most chop saws will tilt also, where the blade literally moves over to the left or moves over to the right. I think in their case it may only move one direction, but then again you can turn your tile around depending on where you want your 45 cut to be. So I love that about DeWalt, and you know, I'm jealous that they can do a 45 just by tipping the blade, that they don't need one of these. But again, the advantages and the disadvantages of every saw depends on every tiler out there, what is important to them. And the 2 things that are important to me the most is that my tray doesn't rust and that I'm able to remove my table. Those are 2 big issues. Plus, I just like the sturdiness. There is a certain sturdiness to these saws. If you look online, you're going to see the Tilematic, which this used to be, and also, what is it, Felker, Husqvarna now, the Tilematic, which, you know, in the old day I already explained. They're all basically the same makeup. They're almost all the parts are interchangeable with each other. The tables are basically the same, the motors are the same, the setup is the same, and so I like that continuity, that consistency with all 3 of those. Whereas the DeWalt, you know, it is what it is. I don't think they're all interchangeable with each other with all the parts and all that stuff with the different models. Anyway, that's my review. I do have a smaller Husky table saw, what I call a table saw. This is a very, very small wet saw that typically I don't use very often. It's a cool little saw. I like it because, you know, it's very sturdy. This is, you know, like a cast iron or cast aluminum or something like that. The makeup of this is not cheesy at all. So they did very well manufacturing this saw. The only issue that I have with table saws, the biggest issue I have with them is that this blade, even though you have a splash guard up here, it never seems to work. And even if you put it down to prevent splash, you can't see your cut. So inevitably, you have to raise it up, and when you raise it up, this blade shoots out water. So when I have to use this, which is, as I said, very, very rare, I'll use it on the backsplash, is about all I use this for. So when I do use this, I know I'm going to get wet. It's just inevitable. I can't help it. So as a rule, I don't use these. For a DIYer, for a one-time type of use, I think this probably cost brand new about $180 as opposed to some of the other cheesier table saws, which, you know, you can get for about $100, $120 at Home Depot. Big box stores, all those places will sell them for about the $100 mark. Paying a little bit more will get you a little bit more quality on one of these. And as I said, for a backsplash or doing a small project or something like that, I wouldn't cut a large tile on one of these. Again, you know, you have a smaller blade, so the stability of the cut's not going to be that good if your tile is really thick or porcelain or something like that. But for around the house, a DIY type project, this is a decent saw. Getting to the price again, brand new, about $150, $180. These saws run, I think, probably at the high end of industrial type tile saws. For one of these Tilematic TS250X, you're going to pay about anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400. The newer ones that they have out now, I think, trump that. I think those are about $1,800, pushing about $2,000. Why do you want to pay that much? Well, because of quality. This tile saw I actually got from a pawn shop, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago. About 5 or 6 years ago at a pawn shop, I spent, I think, $400 for this tile saw. And I already knew it was a great deal because, again, I'm looking at buying a new one, and then I just happened to stumble upon this one, and rather than spend $1,200 or $1,400, I only had to spend $400, and this thing has been great. Now, I have replaced a few things. These motors that are in here are belt driven, so the belts do corrode and eventually break, not very often. This cover comes off pretty easily. You can replace the belt pretty easily. I think I've replaced the switch once, maybe twice, because I use it quite a bit. Of course, you know, you're going to replace blades on occasion, depending on how much you use it. What else have I replaced? I think that's about it. You know, it's kind of maintenance free. There are some little things that I don't like about it. Again, you know, the splash guard is one of them. I don't like this you know, this blade guard on all of these type of brand saws that I've had are kind of raggedy. This is supposed to tighten it up. This wing nut is supposed to tighten it up, but after a while it loses its tension. All it is a bolt that goes up underneath and goes out. But eventually those become useless, and this thing rattles around, and you can hear it literally when you're sawing. And so I have to shim up with a screw or something like that. And I'm sorry, this thing is really dirty. It's really dirty. A lot of mortar, thin set, a lot of stuff on here, and I do clean it up from time to time. I can't get it totally clean, but it's literally gone through a lot of tile, so that's how it ends up looking after a while. So anyway, getting back to the cost on them, as I said, I bought this from a pawn shop for about, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was about $400, $450, not much more than that, and I really lucked out on that. So this has been a real workhorse for me through the years. I was looking at buying a brand new one. I've never owned a brand new tile saw. As I said, with my Tilematics, I got them usually at pawn shops back in the past when they were the powder blue. When they changed over to Husqvarna, you know, like I said, 5 or 6 years ago, I ended up getting really lucky and getting this for a great deal. So the last, I don't know, a couple weeks or month or so, I thought, you know what, it's getting close to Christmas. Let me treat myself. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and just decide to spend the $1,200 for one of these brand new. Then I happened to stumble upon this one on eBay, and it was only one of these on eBay. And I'm like, wow, I got really, really lucky on this. Really lucky. On top of that, the seller said that you must pick up, he won't deliver. And he just happened to live an hour from me. That's just crazy. Like, how would you find the saw you're looking for at the time you're looking for it, and there's only one, and it happens to be an hour drive from you, so there's no shipping or anything. I just had to drive out there and pick it up. Again, same thing, $400. There was some issues with this. It didn't come with the blade, but no biggie. Blades cost me about $40, so that was no big deal. On the water pump, it's supposed to have, for lack of a better term, a filter. It's like, well, I can show you better than I can tell you. So it screws on there, and it keeps out all the sediment and everything that floats down to the bottom of your pan. You want this on there, and obviously it didn't come with that. So I could go to Husqvarna and I could buy that. If I even if I have to buy the whole new pump assembly just to get that, it's no big deal. It's about $80, so I still saved a bunch of money. This is basically how that saw used to look about 5 or 6 years ago, and you know, like I've got almost a brand new one now. The issue with this is not a big deal to me. The issue with, what else? Oh, the extended table. So this is an extension part of the table. There's actually 2 bolts that hold that part on, and you can see the 2 holes here, and it didn't come with that. There's also a stop on the back of this. Let me see. There's a stop. So that stop is missing over here, which means I can pull the table all the way out another 5 or 6 inches. But again, that's not a big deal to me. You know, I can make a stop for that. For the price that I ended up spending on this, it was a great deal. So anyway, overall, what I'm basically saying is, if you need something, if you're going to get into the construction business, tile business, you're going to be a tile guy for a while or whatever, you can go out and get one of these. As I said, a used one. You can get a Felker, you can get the Husqvarna Tilematic, and I think there's a couple of others that I recommend for, you know, industrial type of use. But these are this is the main one. This is what I recommend. So to me, it's worth, if you're going to get into it pretty heavy, it's worth spending the $1,000 plus for one of these industrial type of saws. If for whatever reason you decide you don't want to spend that, you can spend half that amount and spend $700 or $800 to get your DeWalt. I think $700 or $800 is a pretty good price point for a construction type, or even a DIYer for that matter, to spend. And I may end up purchasing a DeWalt one day. I don't know. You know, I want to test it out. I want to get my hands on it. I want to go on a couple jobs with it before I really slam it or give it a bad name. And I'm really not slamming it. I'm just saying this is very subjective. What you end up starting out with, and you go through the process of doing this enough, you find out the little things that matter to you. And so, you know, again, I have no reason to switch over brands when this has worked very well for me. And because of those things I've already mentioned, it's what I prefer. So I'm not necessarily slamming DeWalt or any other tile saw out there. It's just my opinion on my particular saw. If somebody wants to go out and buy one of these, then I highly recommend them. And that's it. I will stop talking now and you know, get back to work.